This is a look at the equipment I used on a week-long walk of the Moray Way. Now, the Moray Way is a low-level walk. It's not difficult. It's 100 miles long. I had 5 nights camping, 1 night in accommodation. The forecast was for windy weather at the start, and it was very windy for the first 4 days. But the 3 camps I had in that time, I found sheltered sites. My shelter would have coped if I'd had to camp out in the wind anyway, but I didn't. And the shelter, as you can see here, this is the Mountain Laurel Designs SoloMid XL, which is very much one of my favourites. It's lightweight, it's easy to pitch, it's very roomy, good headroom, massive porch. You can store gear inside as well as room for your sleeping bag. And it stands up, as I say, to the weather pretty well. Now, I took this mesh inner because it was late May and I thought the first midges might be out. They weren't until the very last morning when there were few around, so I never actually did up this inner door, and I could have done without it, but then I'd have been concerned that there might be midges. So with this I didn't have to worry. And even with this mesh inner, the whole unit only weighs just over a kilo. In fact, I didn't do up the fly sheet any night either, because as I say, when it was windy I had sheltered sites, there were no midges, and I always prefer to be as much in the open air as possible. In fact, quite often I rolled this door back as well so that I had a view all the way along this side of the shelter. Pitches with trekking poles. Now, I always, by preference, use pacer poles. I find the handles far more comfortable than anything else. However, they're at full length, they're not really enough for pitching this if you want to have maximum room and keep the fly sheet above the ground for good airflow. So on this trip, for one of the poles, I took a pacer pole tops, which is the handle that you can get separately, and the lower sections of a Black Diamond Explorer pole. And together, I could go up to 140 centimeters that's recommended for this shelter. Anyway, it did fine, as I expected. I love using it. Now let's go on to my sleeping system. My sleep system consisted of 3 parts. The sleeping bag, or semi-sleeping bag I suppose, was the RAB Mythic Ultra 120, which was new 2 years ago, but has already been replaced in RAB's range. However, I really like this in above zero temperatures. It's very, very light, 330 grams. It's filled with high quality down. The upper part of the underside has no insulation. It has 2 bands to go around your sleeping mat. I don't use these. I find it awkward to have a sleeping mat that when you sit up tries to sit up with you. And the bag is wide enough that I can wrap it around me without any cold spots anyway. And the bottom half is standard sleeping bag design. There's no hood, but I always find that again in above zero temperatures I'm tucking the hood underneath me anyway. So overall this is excellent. As I didn't have any really cold nights on the trip at all, this was more than adequate. And I think the last 2 nights I didn't even do the zip up. So that was my sleeping bag, and it also of course folds up, packs away, incredibly small. Now for comfort I had the Therm-A-Rest NeoAir XLite, which inflatable mat. It's not the most comfortable inflatable mat I've got, but it is the lightest at 370 grams, and it's warm enough, certainly to a few degrees below freezing. However, these days I never ever rely on just an inflatable mat. I've had too many failures over the years. So I also took a closed cell foam mat, quite an old battered one now, but this weighs, I think, 190 grams. It's a bit bulky, has to go on the outside of the pack, but you can't puncture it. And during the day it does as a sit mat. Sometimes if the ground was damp, it did for sitting outside the tent. But I certainly wouldn't be without it, and it has made life much more comfortable on a couple of occasions when the inflatable mat has sprung a puncture, which we know they're repairable. But try repairing one in the cold, in a storm, in the dark. It's not very easy, if possible at all. So that's my 3-part sleeping system. Now let's have a look at what I use for cooking and water, and then clothing and a few other items. My cooking gear, all fitted in this mesh bag, and other than the gas canister and water bottles, the total weight was 520 grams, which I think is reasonable. Could have been slightly lighter, but this was fine for what I wanted it to do. I had this tiny titanium Sierra cup, which weighs hardly anything, made by Snow Peak. You can use it on the stove if necessary, or use it for dipping water, various other functions. It's so light, I like to always have it with me. The canister was 3/4 full, and I used about 1/4 of the gas in it. And I had 2 spoons, a long-handled one for eating out of packets, and a standard one for the rest of the time. The pot was the fire maple Petrel Ramen pot with the heat exchanger on the bottom. It's not the lightest of the Petrel pots, but I like it because of the width and the fact that it's not that tall, which means it's good for cooking and eating out of. And I knew that most of the walk, when I was resupplying as I went along, I wasn't going to get, you know, specialist cook in the bag backpacking meals. I was going to be buying pasta sauces and ramen noodles that needed simmering and needed a pot in which they were less likely to stick, and it was easier to stir and then, as I say, eat them out of. Inside the pot itself, I had a little bag with a lighter and a fire steel. I always like to have more than one source of ignition just in case. And the stove, which doesn't have an igniter, a piezo igniter, which I don't mind because I don't trust them anyway. I've broken quite a few. Had a small windshield, which I think comes with it, which I think I used once. And this is the Petrel Ultralight stove, you know, which is a low profile stove. It's very stable. The pot fits on it. It's slightly fiddly, but there it is. When it's on, that's quite, you know, quite stable. It's quite efficient. As you can see, there's no wind protection, which is why that windscreen is needed in anything other than a light breeze. It has good flame control, so you can use it for simmering, and overall I think it's a neat little stove. Certainly the lightest of this type. Canister top stoves are even lighter than this, weighs just under 100 grams, but overall, and folds up small, it's a stove that I really like. And also in the pot, another mug. This is the Cetus Summit X mug, which I've been using recently and have decided, having initially thought I'm not very keen on that, that in, again, above 0 temperatures, when it's not too cold, I like it very much. And of course it's convenient for packing. So this was mainly for my coffee in the mornings. Anyway, that was all my cook kit. I have my usual water bottles, 2 quart size, 2 litre size bags, and a couple of times I did carry them full for the last few hours of the day, because particularly on the Moray Coast Trail there wasn't much in the way of water along the way, and certainly not where I wanted to camp. And also the water had often been through farmland, through campgrounds, through towns and villages, so I wasn't sure how clean it would be. So for once I took this LifeStraw 650ml squeeze bottle with a filter in it, and certainly again, particularly on the Moray Coast Trail, I used this quite a bit. Of course, when I was cooking, I was boiling the water anyway, but on the hotter days towards the end of the walk, I needed to drink a fair bit during the day, and this is actually, I found, quite effective, quite easy to use. You can drink out of it, and you don't have to squeeze that hard to get the water to flow. So overall, this was, I think, worth having, even though at, I think, something like 240 grams for a little bottle, it's quite heavy, but you do have the filter. Anyway, that's all my cooking stuff and drinking stuff, and now I'll have a look at the pack and clothing and maybe a few other odds and ends. My pack was the Hyperlite Junction 55, which was kindly supplied, loaned to me for test by Ultralight Outdoor Gear, and it is an ultralight pack made of a composite fabric with tape seams, so it should prove pretty well waterproof, though that wasn't tested on this trip. It weighs 900 and something grams, bit under a kilo, which for a pack this size, and as it has with a frame in the back, is very good. And it, to some extent, the design is fairly typical for lightweight packs these days. There's a huge mesh pocket on the front, made of a much more open weave mesh than they often are. Solid pockets on the side, which I like because mesh pockets here can easily get torn, which is to say I've torn a few. A roll top, you can obviously fill it really high if you want to. Hip belt pockets, which are quite roomy, padded hip belt, and overall it was pretty comfortable. The average weight I carried with food and a bit of water was 12 kilos, and it handled that no problem. When I had the 4 litres of water in as well. It just managed, but I could feel it, you know, pulling down on my back. So I reckon you're probably talking about a maximum of 15 kilos as a comfortable load to carry. But then, of course, one of the reasons for getting a lightweight pack is for lightweight loads. If you're going to carry very heavy loads, you might as well get, you know, a heavier pack with a more substantial suspension system. But as a lightweight pack, yep, this is fine. Now, clothing, well, the basic clothing that I wore most of the first 4 days was actually the shirt I'm wearing now. This is an old Rohan trekking shirt, and I don't think they make it anymore. I've had it well over a decade. There's plenty of shirts like this. What's good about this one is it's stud fastening, which makes it easy for all the adjustments. More so certainly the buttons, which can be a bit fiddly, and it's got big roomy pockets, which I like if you want to carry your phone, if you want to carry other items in the pocket. These will easily take it. Some shirts, the pockets are really a bit small for anything much. But as I say, this is what I wore certainly the first 3 or 4 days, because it resisted the wind reasonably well. And then when the weather got hotter and drier, I changed to the most comfortable t-shirt I have ever had, which is a bamboo one, which I've worn an awful lot. It's incredibly comfortable. It's now completely shapeless. It's stained. It's got holes in it. And I suppose as I like it so much, I really ought to get another one. But I can't fault this for the comfort. It's great in the heat. It works quite well as a base layer under something else. I mean, it dries reasonably fast. And as I say, I like it very much. I also took, as always, a wind shirt. This is the Patagonia Houdini. I think I wore this for a few hours one day when the wind was really strong and cold. But overall, this shirt did the job adequately. Again, as I say, as it was a low-level walk, high in the mountains, this would probably have had more use. For warmth, I took another old favourite, the Berghaus Hydra shell, which only weighs 220 grams, a lightweight insulated top. I wore this in camp a few times when the temperature got down to around 10 degrees and it was slightly chilly. I didn't really need it, but I wouldn't have gone without some warm wear, and this is about as light as anything I've got. There is an updated version from Berghaus, which I've also got, which works just the same. And again, for summer, I think it's great. I took waterproofs, of course. This is my current favourite outside of severe winter conditions. This is the Montane Cetus Lite. I like it very much. Again, it's 300 and something grams. It's very good. It stayed in the pack the whole trip, as did this old pair of Berghaus Pack-Lite over trousers, which again are very light. These are 200 and something grams. They weren't needed, thankfully. I'm always happy when waterproofs aren't needed. I would never not take them with me. So that's all the clothing, except for, which I've got over here, of course, my footwear. And these are Ultra Lone Peak. These are Lone Peak 7, I think. They seem to bring out new ones every year. I think they're on Lone Peak 9 Plus at the moment. But these are the 7. I've had them a couple of years. They've had a fair amount of wear. There's still reasonable tread on the bottom, and the thing is, they're incredibly comfortable. And I wore them with thin, darn tough socks, I think the first 4 days, and then when it got warm, the last 2 days, I didn't bother with socks at all, because my feet were getting too hot, even in the very thin socks. But these were my footwear, I say, and they worked really well. So that's a look at the basic equipment I took with me. It all performed fine. There isn't anything I'd have changed. The same set of gear would have done for, you know, a walk in the mountains at the same time of year. For the Moray Way, it was easily enough. Anyway, I hope you found this interesting. I'd welcome any comments, whether you think I was daft to take something or think there was something that I omitted that was essential. Let me know below. Thank you.